Hello, Jigsaw Universe subscribers. Welcome to our next interview with a fellow writer. Today we have the author of the Rivers of London series and former Doctor Who writer Ben Aaronovitch. Ben, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us today.
It's lovely to be here.
Okay, and how is the weather in England today?
Bright but cold, so frosty in the morning, but sunshiny now. So
yeah, and that's the way it is in Arizona. Believe it or not, we in Tempe, Arizona, it's cold. It's in the 40s and 50s in the morning, and then it gets to
that's 40s Fahrenheit, right?
Correct.
Okay, right, because when you say 40s, that means something completely different over here.
Right, because of Celsius. Understood. Are you ready to talk about Rivers of London and your writing career?
Always ready to talk about Rivers of London. In fact, talking about myself and my writing career is about something I could be guaranteed to do for hours and hours and hours without pause.
Okay, number one, Ben, what are the names of at least 3 people or events that influenced your decision to become a writer?
Oh God, 3. Well, one of them. God, that's really quite hard to sort of pin it down. I mean, there really wasn't ever a point where it never occurred to me not to write. So it's like saying, what are the 3 events that led you to breathe continuously for the last 57 years? I'm lazy. I like reading books, and I hate work. So yeah, I'm going to go with those 3 as the motivating factor. I mean, if you have to look at particular people, I had a couple of very good English teachers. As you'll find, most writers generally have at least one really good English teacher, or they really hated their English teachers and actually started writing to get back at them. I discovered science fiction at the age of 9, and I went through that phase that you do where you just read everything continuously without any regard to quality or anything. So you just hoover up every single book. And this was in the 70s. So I actually managed to blow through what would now be considered the young adult section within about 3 weeks. So I hit the adult section. And looking back, I had no idea what half the books were about, I think. Ursula K. Le Guin's adult books are quite hard to going for when you're 10.
Okay.
Yeah, The Left Hand of Darkness. I had no idea what was going on in The Left Hand of Darkness. I hadn't even discovered sexuality at that point, let alone gender. So, but all those writers, all those 70s, disco, what they call rather disparagingly called disco era writers, Philip K. Dick, Ursula K. Le Guin, Robert Heinlein, although he's out of favour at the moment, Arthur C. Clarke. All those people, Asimov, they I just didn't bind them, and they just kind of percolated in my head. Andre Norton was a particular influence, especially her kind of like her sort of Sargasso of space, things like that. The Solar Queen stories and the Galactic Patrol stories, I really like those. I'm just one of those people who read a lot of books and then went, I could do this, and did it eventually.
Okay, excellent. And thank you. Number 2, please explain at least 2 ways your experience with Doctor Who influenced your later career as a novelist, screenwriter, and comic book writer.
Well, my experience with Doctor Who, I can actually make 2 direct connections. One, I was paid by W.H. Alyn to write my first ever novel, which very few novelists get paid to write their first ever novel. So that was cool, because they got me to adapt the Remembrance of the Daleks as a novella. Well, it's a novella really, because it was 44,000 words. So that bloody influenced me, because I had to learn how to write prose. Up to that point, I hadn't written any prose, bar a couple of short stories. And then simultaneously, Andrew Cartmel, my collaborator on the comics, wrote some of the comics for Doctor Who magazine, and so therefore I got to watch the process of how to write a comic in sort of like real time, and so that was very helpful when I wanted to do comics later on.
Excellent. Anything else the show had an influence on you?
Well, I mean, it was Doctor Who. I'm British. It's Doctor Who. I mean, when it came back, I knew it was going to be a success, which I don't think the people at the BBC thought it was going to be. I knew it was going to be a success because there was basically a TARDIS-shaped hole in the British psyche that just was still there. I mean, kids were still calling time machines TARDISes. I mean, kids that were born after it had gone off the air were still doing Dalek impressions and calling time machines TARDISes, and they knew who Doctor Who was. And it was just obvious to me that there was just a space. There was a space there. That's why bringing it back on a Saturday afternoon was like a piece of genius, right? It was just waiting for there. We all just sunk back into it, and it got huge ratings. So yeah, I mean, it was a big influence in that it was the most consistent piece of British science fiction that was going on in audiovisual science fiction that was going on in my life.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Excellent. Of the stories, Doctor Who stories, scripts or novels that you've written, which one do you consider the best?
Remembrance of the Daleks is the best. That is the best script. The best novel is The Also People.
Okay. Can you tell the viewers what is The Also People?
The Also People, which is now pulped and so thus unavailable except as a vintage paperback, which I find hilarious that half my books have been pulped now. Was a New Adventures book. It was Virgin did a line of New Adventures, which were basically what we would call a tie-in novel now, which wasn't done so much when they were doing it. Now it's routine. Everyone will have a tie-in set of novels, Star Wars, Star Trek. These franchises will all have tie-in novels. But in those days, it was quite unusual. And the Virgin New Adventures novels was really unusual in the sense that the BBC didn't care. So usually if you write a Star Wars or a Star Trek thing, the suits about thousands of miles above you, right, will have opinions about your work and what they want. And they have this kind of dead hand effect on the creativity of the writers. But in New Adventures, there was just us and Darvel Evans, the editor, and that was it. The BBC didn't care. We just went mad. So we had a good time. And so some very, very good stuff. I mean, Russell T Davies wrote for it. I mean, there are a lot of people, a lot of people who very creative people who kind of started there and got to put down on paper the most mad ideas, some of the most mad ideas you can possibly have.
And the other people, was that a Seventh Doctor story or was that an Eighth Doctor story?
Yeah, that the Also People was a Seventh Doctor story.
Okay. And again, what was if I may, what was the general plot, please?
The general plot was basically the Doctor goes to the culture. That was basically the plot.
When you say go, I'm sorry.
Ian M. Banks' culture from the Ian M. Banks.
I've heard the name, but I'm sorry, it's not registering.
Well, Ian M. Banks wrote a series of books. I mean, he wrote a lot of really good books, but his most famous science fiction series are books set around in and sometimes opposed to the culture, which is an advanced civilization.
Okay.
And it's a utopia, basically. It's a very interesting utopia, I think. And basically, one thing Doctor Who loves is a utopia, because you love to get the Doctor and smash him into a utopia and see which one breaks first, you see. And I couldn't resist it, so there you go.
Okay, excellent. This last question on Who. There's a rumor out there that if Doctor Who had continued in the 80s, you might have become the script editor after Andrew Cartmel. Did you want to comment on that?
Well, it's like a lot of things. It's a lot of things surrounding that kind of what they call the lost season. In that we had a lot of ideas, and that was one of them. But that's all they were. They were just ideas. Nothing had been formalized. Nothing. I mean, as far as I know, nothing. That you don't just become a script editor at the BBC. And there's a process. But there's I don't know. It would have been nice. I needed the money apart from anything else. But, that's just the way, it's just one of those things that we were thinking about, like all the stories, ideas, and everything that have been kind of solidified as stories now. We're all just we would sit around and drink coffee and talk about what we wanted to do, and that was all it was. That was the stage it was at. It never really got beyond that stage because we were cancelled before we got to the stage where we would seriously sit down and think about it.
Understood. Okay. Moving forward, number 5. What was the major inspiration for creating the River of London series? It actually, when I was looking over the books, it kind of seems like X-Files meets Scotland Yard.
Okay. Well, in some ways, it's the anti-X-Files because the science of X-Files is so bloody awful. It used to drive me nuts. And they used to say things, and that whole conspiracy theory stuff just used to drive me nuts. I don't know. I'm very anti-conspiracy theory. It's not really the fault of the X-Files, which was a very good show.
Okay.
But I mean, in the X-Files, I always like the Monster of the Week stories more than I like if you watch them now, you kind of the flying saucer conspiracy stuff is so boring compared to the kind of like the really fascinating monster of the week stories. And so yeah, it was influenced, but really mine was like, what if Gandalf had joined the Sweeney, which is a very British kind of. You can't say that to Americans. They go, "What's the Sweeney?" I mean,
Actually, I was going to ask you that. What is the Sweeney?
The Sweeney was a very famous '70s police show in Britain.
Okay.
And it's I suppose the influence is it's all very Cockney. It's all very London. Okay. We're the Sweeney. Starred John Thor, who went on to play Morse. And but it was kind of like cops doing cop stuff, and then like I like the idea of cops like that doing magic. That was basically what it was. It was called Magic Cops for a very long time because I couldn't think of a better title. Mm-hmm. So as a working title for the projects, it's called Magic Cops. All the files on my computer at the moment are all labeled as Magic Cops.
Okay.
Because I can't be bothered to change all the folder names. So
well, that's fine.
They kind of grandfathered themselves in.
Right. So these four British shows, and so you saw as Gandalf meeting some of these old inspirations from the 70s.
Well, I mean, Gandalf, because Harry Potter, when I first came up with the idea, Harry Potter was just a twinkle in J.K. Rowling's eye.
Okay.
So now everyone goes, oh, it's Harry Potter, joins up and joins the filth. But grows up and joins the filth. But it really was much more kind of like it's in a way it was much more influenced by Ursula K. Le Guin and the Wizard of Earthsea books than it was and Gandalf and the Sprague Pant and other writers like that, sort of like early what we would call now urban fantasy, but no one knew what urban fantasy was back in those days. But it was basically just designed by. I thought, what if cops could do magic? That was basically that was the inspiration. There's not always a literary inspiration, you see. Things. Literary. There's always a tendency in literary criticism to look at the work and go, "Well, this is obviously influenced by Jane,
right?
Somebody's Mansfield Park or something." But they might not have read it. You don't know. They might have been influenced by the fact that someone, poked them in the eye with a stick at some point and then they wanted to get back at them. So they wrote a story about how awful they were. You don't know these things. You could be influenced by, I'm as much influenced by shows that you will never have heard of, right?
Right.
Like Rent-A-Ghost and Robert's Robots, things I was watching when I was a kid that you will never have heard of. They never made it across the channel, thank God. Not channel, sorry, the pond, thank God. And things that it's always so there's no point me saying what were your influences because you won't have heard of most of them, and that's a good thing because it means I sound much more original.
Okay, I get that. So
Terry Pratchett is an influence. I mean Terry Pratchett's an influence, but Terry Pratchett's an influence on my writing in the same way that say Ian M. Banks and William Gibson influences on my writing, in the sense that they're kind of like the foundation upon which I built my style. So if you want to give me a literary antecedents, but they're just an influence because they kind of look over my shoulder and go, haha, that's not very good, do something better. So
I understand. So tell us, in essence, tell the viewers, what is the River of London series about? Obviously gave us some brushstrokes there, and how that universe and the recurring characters like Peter Grant have evolved through the series of novels, short stories, and comic books that you've written.
Well, it's quite a hard concept. I mean, I found it quite a hard concept. It was one of those things I knew when I had it that I was going to have to write it because it's almost impossible to précis. Basically, it's about a probationary constable called Peter Grant who's coming to the end of his probationary period, who, befitting his lowly status, is left guarding a crime scene late at night, 3:00 in the morning, and someone comes forward and says, "It's all right, Governor, I saw the whole thing." And he goes, "Oh, you better give a statement." He says, "Oh, I can't do that on account of me being dead." And it turns out that a ghost has come forward as a witness. And what marks Peter out is that he doesn't panic, he doesn't run around, he doesn't pretend that he doesn't know what a ghost is, or he doesn't go, "Oh no, ghosts don't exist," because he's an empiricist. And so therefore he's seeing a ghost, therefore ghost exists, right? There's no getting away with it. So he takes a witness statement from this ghost because it might help solve the crime, because that's what witnesses are for. And this brings him to the attention of the very, very small department, fossilized department that deals with magic, which is headed by Detective Chief Inspector Nightingale.
Okay.
And through Peter chooses, through circumstances, kind of guiding there, but in the end, he chooses to become an apprentice because he wants to know about magic. He goes, wow, magic! I want to do that. So he becomes the first apprentice in something like 70 years. And so therefore, and then things just kind of kick off because they thought magic was fading from the world, but really what had just happened was that it kind of gone a bit dormant, but it hadn't faded, and so therefore it's coming back now, and like everyone's like running around, and there's more crime, and Peter has come along at just the right time because he's a born organizer, so he's constantly kind of trying to bring the folly, which is actually so fossilized it's basically a 1930s institution. He's trying to bring it into the 21st century. As Patrick always says, kicking and screaming into the century of the fruit bat. And it's basically about his adventures. At its core, though, it is a detective series. You have your detective, and you have a book, and each book has a crime, and in the book, each book, you solve the crime. That's how I conceived of it. It's not a fantasy series in the sense of a Song of Ice and Fire is, with a beginning, a middle, and an end. We're not building to a climax. I'm not running people because it's a fantasy series in some ways. People assume it's building somewhere, and I know God knows it's going somewhere. I don't know where it's going precisely, but it's not like there is no point where the hordes of ice warriors come bumping over. But that's just not going to happen unless I can come up with a really good reason for it. And it's much more like the 87th Precinct novels. That was my model, was the 87th Precinct novels, which is a police procedural which deals with, that's an ensemble piece, but the similar principle is the same. Or the Morse, or any other detective series where you have a detective and you have a crime, and then they deal with it. Although one of the things I try to avoid is like always making it personal. I've noticed there's this tendency now, all detectives must be personally engaged in the crime, which I don't like, because the whole point of having a police detective is that, unlike, say, a member of someone's family or thing, they don't have a personal connection to the crime. They're just doing their job. And that's what, for me, makes the detective interesting. This is a person who peels back the truth, peels back the lies to find the truth for a living. And they do it, and they don't do it because their long lost grandmother was killed by somebody, or their serial killer husband was never caught, or something like that. They're missing their daughter. He does it because he gets up in the morning. He punches his card, so to speak, and gets up, does the crime, steals the crime.
Excellent. So, as you said, there's no, like you said, in a fantasy series, there's no arc. There's no
huge epic arc. There are arcs in it. Because he gets older, he meets people, more people join the folly, more people. There's what people like to call a big bad, but actually he's just a recurring villain who comes back until I got bored of him, and then things happen. That's resolved. I'm not going to say how. There's betrayals and happiness and a pair of twins now, and these things just sort of like go on.
Okay. Understood. Kind of like life. Understood.
Yeah. Basically like that. I mean, let's be honest. Character arcs is something that only happens in fiction.
Right.
None of us have a character arc. We never get bloody closure. We just kind of muddle through until we die. That's basically what people do. Character arcs is only something that happens in fiction, and one of the reasons it happens in fiction is you usually have like only one character in this one book. If you have a character over multiple books, you can't keep giving them a character arc in every single bloody book. That's where a lot of television shows go wrong, because they try and give the detective a character arc in every single story, and by the end of about 4 stories, the guy or the girl is basically dead, because they just like that all their family have been killed, or their whatever. It just becomes very, very silly.
Okay.
But in real life, people go to work, they solve crimes, then they go home. They're a bit wiser, a bit older, a bit closer to death.
Well, on that uplifting note, let's go. So, of the formats, and Rivers of London is both a novel and a comic book format. Which one do you prefer?
Oh, I prefer the novels. I prefer the novels because they're the more complete. Comics is I've got very because I started in television, I've kind of gone off collaborative process. I like doing the comics, but it is a collaborative process. You do it with other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done it with some very talented people, but you do find yourself going, no, but I can't draw. You see, so you can't go to your artist. So in other words, you have to let the artist's own interpretation of your characters come through as well, if you want them to do a good job. So you can't say, no, he's skinnier or taller or fatter, because if you want that, go learn to draw, right? Draw your own comics if that's what you want, the amount of control you have. And that's fine. I don't mind doing that because it's the comics, but I actually like the fact that in the books I'm God, basically. Everything that happens in the book happens according to my design.
Okay, understood. And before we get on to the more general writer's craft questions, Ben, is there can you tell the viewers where they could go to find your Rivers of London novels or graphic novels?
Depending on where you live, obviously. Right, at the moment, the first 3 books are only available in America, in North America, as that's the bad news, as ebooks, right? This is because I basically bought the rights because we didn't think the publisher was doing a very good job, and they weren't interested.
Okay.
So we brought them back on, but the good news is they are updated ebooks. So we went and had some terrible typos. We basically went and we had some extra, ridiculously proofread kind of copy. So hopefully we went through them and we took out most of the typos. Although every time you do a process like that, you always end up adding more typos. That's what's so frustrating. So after a while, it becomes a kind of like one of those processes that, what do you call it? Those processes, some diminishing returns. You get diminishing returns on it. Yeah, that was like you keep just adding more typos, finding typos, and adding more typos. So and then forgetting what the book's about after a while, which is if you read a book too often, you just get so sick of it you don't want anything to do it. Right. So that's so the first 3 books. The first book is now called Rivers of London in North America, although you will be able to still find probably Midnight Riot, which was the inexplicable North American title.
Okay.
So that's North America. Then the rest are all available via Amazon and Barnes and Noble and your local trusty bookshop. Go in, demand that they stock my books.
Absolutely.
Demand it.
Absolutely.
And there are 9 novels, and there are 3 novellas.
And how many graphic novels?
And there are, I think it's 9 graphic novels with another one under production now.
Okay. Looking at your site, you're also producing another novel? I think I saw that in the works, or did I misread?
Yeah, I'm writing one now. I mean, I'm always writing a novel. There's always like something under production. So yeah.
Okay.
But I'm writing a novel. Somebody else is writing. I've decided to bring in some other writers to diversify the kind of approach for the comics. I thought if we're going to do a collaborative project, you might as well bring in other writers as well. And so I'm co-writing with some other writers because you use a lot of plot and a lot of story in a graphic novel, much more than you use so in a 5-page graphic novel, 4-issue graphic novel, you use as much story as you use in a novel, and I was running out of stuff and also it's a particular kind of stuff. Certain stories aren't very suited to graphic novels, so I basically need someone come up with some good stories.
Okay. Well, yeah, no, I totally understand. So I'm in the process of drafting my 7th, or doing the research and outlining my 7th right now. And sometimes you run into too many ideas, and then one day you get writer's block too. So yeah, I totally get it.
Yeah,
very good.
Plenty of stuff in the novels, though. Don't have to worry about that.
I'm sorry.
There's plenty of stuff in the novels. There's still plenty of novel ideas.
Oh, okay. Understood. Okay. Next question. Please, for you personally, what is the writing process for you personally? Do you start with an outline and then proceed to draft status? Do you brainstorm thoughts and go from there? Do you keep?
I'm one of those people. I kind of run up and down the spectrum. I mean, I know some people who religiously plot right from the beginning. And I know some people who just start with page 1. Oh, what's his name? John walks into a shop. That some people start like that and just keep going. A lot of people who are trained as journalists will write 4,000 words and then trim it down to 500 because that's the way they're trained, and they do it ridiculously fast. They write 2,000 words a day and then they trim it down. I'm a very slow writer, but I tend to produce a clean copy. So what I do is I basically usually have a rough idea of how it starts. Sometimes I know how it ends,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes I know what happens in the middle. And then as I start kind of like coming up with bits. I see coming up with bits of it. I sort of like bounce ahead and think, that's what's going to happen, or that's going to happen, and I put markers in to say that's going to happen, and then I'll write little scenes as they come to me, and then these things will sort of join up, and it kind of like, rather like bacteria spreading over a dish. You will get a story, and sometimes that's a really easy process. Sometimes it's a very hard process. I can't tell when I wake up in the morning which one it's going to be. So you wake up, you go, "Yes, I shall now write thousands of words." And you go, sometimes you just have to stop and then plot out what happens next, because one of the main reasons you get writer's block is there's two reasons for getting writer's block. One, you don't know what happens next, and so therefore you're thinking, I must write 500 words, but you don't know what you're writing 500 words for. And the other one is when you go down a cul-de-sac and you've gone down the wrong turn, you've made a wrong turning somewhere, and the story is going in the wrong direction. And I hate that one because you usually end up editing out a couple of thousand words. And for me, that's like, it's a whole 1,000 words, although sometimes, you hide them off and they become a short story or something. But that so I basically just wing it. I mean, I'm not a pantster in the sense I don't write by the seat of my pants. I'm a very lazy writer who does the minimum possible in order to get the story to work.
Understood. So from start to finish, how long does it generally take you? Does it vary?
No, it varies completely. I've done one in 4 months, and one took 2 years. It's got to the point where my editor doesn't bother giving a release date until I've handed it in.
Okay. And just out of curiosity, with your editor, I assume both beta and line editor, how much of your, and this happens with me, how much of what you submitted originally is there at the end?
Oh, with me, almost 100%.
Okay, that's excellent.
I like I said, I have it, and that's pretty much down to the fact that I have I have a friend, Andrew Cartman, who co-writes the comics with me,
right.
And he has a much better grasp of things like grammar and punctuation to stop me from worrying about, because you know how you can get hung up a sentence. You go, does the comma go after the and, or does the comma go there? I don't know. Should I put a full stop there? How long is this sentence? He basically goes through my work and he's got the kind of brain where he spots mistakes. So I have a mini copy editing on each chapter.
Okay.
And he says, I'm just your punctuation monkey, but he's not. He's much more than that, because he goes, no, this is boring. This is the most boring thing you've ever written, And then I will fix these things. So I tend to fix those kinds of things during the process. And then when I hand it to my editor, it's usually, it's usually just like, sometimes there's a bit where he goes, yeah, but how did we get from A to B? Because we call those opera houses, because in the first book, Peter Grunt needs to go to the opera house to intercept his friend Leslie. And he goes to the opera house, and Andrew went, why is he going to the opera house? He said, well, he's got to intercept Leslie. Yes, but why does he know to go to the opera house? And I realized I knew why. I just hadn't put it in the novel. So that's one of the things you have to watch, especially towards the end of a book, where you know where you're going. Yeah, towards the end. Yeah. And someone has to come along and go, yeah, but you never actually say that.
Right.
Or, that's this character that appears 2/3 of the way through. I think maybe you should say them. So I get a little bit of that, but I don't tend to get that very much, not as much as some writers. Some writers, they write very fast, and then they like to have their editor tell them stuff.
Right.
I like my editor to go, here's some money, and then.
Understood. But what you described, that's happened to me too, where my editor, because we think it's all great the way it is, and then the editor with a fresh set of eyes finds,
yes, you need someone. So I'm very lucky in that I have Andrew doing it on a chapter by chapter basis, and then I have somebody else who comes in who's never seen it before and just reads it in one go and can spot all those sorts of things. So that's very useful. But I try and hand in as clean a copy as I possibly can.
Okay.
that doesn't need very many changes. And so far, I've never had to kind of like go back and like change the whole of Act One or something because it didn't make any sense. So, but it might happen. I'm not saying it will never happen. Hasn't happened so far.
Right. How many, and I know this, I think I already know the answer to this. How many drafts do you generally go through? Or I know, what's that?
One.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I hand in a draft. They make some changes. So I suppose two, maximum two. I've done three, and then it goes to the copy editor, who I then fight with because the copy editor, by definition, is someone who actually does know how grammar works. My books are written in the vernacular, and so therefore I have to go, no, Pete, that's just the way Peter talks. You can't, I know it's not how that sentence construction is supposed to be, but also I have a very, very good copy editor who will go and research things. Like, I looked into like the 18th century manuscripts to see how this word was spelled, if it's a bit obscure. I think, wow, that's more research than I was willing to do. His notes says they make wonderful research notes on sort of obscure topics, but he's very good. And you've always got to remember when you're doing this process, it's not, their word is not law, right? Your editor's law, it's a negotiation. They're suggestions, right?
Right.
You can always come up with something that fixes the problem better than the suggestion, and they love that. The editor wants you to come up with something that fixes the solution better than the thing they said. And when you start out, you're kind of at the mercy of your editor. So if your editor goes, it's 20,000 words too long, it's 20,000 words too long, and you have to chop 20,000. Not that this ever happened to me. Right. When you get to my stage of career, it's basically they can't do anything to you. You could hand it in and you could say, no, I'm not changing anything. But that's a mistake, right? If you have a good editor, you should regard them as a valuable thing, right. A useful thing to have. They're a useful thing to have, just as I have people who checks my work for the policing and some of the science and stuff like that. Bits I will farm out to other people. I go, where's this geology correct? They go, no, geology doesn't work like that. Okay.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree with you on the value of editors. I totally agree with you. Of all your works, which one has been the easiest one that you have written?
The first one is always the easiest one.
Really? Okay.
Because you're writing in that mad kind of like, I am a genius, I will write this and it will be. When I wrote the first 4 pages, I mean, I was going bankrupt and I had a full-time job, right? And still going bankrupt, which you can do if you live in London. And I wrote the first 4 pages and I looked at it and I went, fuck me, this is going to sell, right? And I knew it was going to sell, not necessarily to people, but to the like gatekeepers, right? I knew it was going to sell to a publisher. I knew I could sell it to an editor and a publisher, and I knew I would get an advance, which is what I really needed at that time. And after that, I just knew that it was just a question of sitting down and grinding out the words, just getting the words out in this voice, because the voice was so good, and then there was like lots of plot and there was lots of really clever things, but it was written quite fast and quite desperately at 4 o'clock in the morning. And everything else has been a bit harder since then, because that was like wonderful motivation. Like, write this or go bankrupt. So it's like, yeah, I will get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to write this. No problem now. It's like 4 o'clock. Well, not that I get up at 4 o'clock, but I couldn't do that even if I wanted to now. So, and also there's a kind of sweet spot where you're writing and everyone's very enthusiastic, but you're not famous, and so therefore they don't expect you to go away and do anything. So you don't have to do tours and you don't have to do all these sorts of things, right? Which is like bad in some ways, because how are you going to sell your book? On the other hand, a lot of time gets eaten up on kind of ancillary things. You have to start filling in forms, and really big forms, and all sorts of things. Doing tax returns that you've never had to do because you've never earned enough money to actually have to do VAT or something, and he's like, I want to write. You got to do this, okay. And then finally you get big enough that you can have an accountant, and then you don't have to worry about it anymore until they steal all your money and run off into the distance.
Did that happen to you?
No.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So the first.
It's a possibility.
No, understood. So your first one was your easiest. What was your most difficult?
The third one.
Okay. Why was that?
I don't know. I just stalled. I just stalled. I couldn't get it to grind. The characters weren't working. I'm a bit at the mercy of my characters. I tend to go around and my characters tend to get stroppy if they don't do what I don't get them to do fun stuff. I lost the third one, the book had come out. I was suddenly under pressure because everyone liked the first two, and so therefore I was now kind of like, oh, why if they don't like the third one? And it was the difficult third album, which is the equivalent of and that's okay because you just got to grind through it. You just got to learn to cope with these things. Now I have all sorts of mental toolkits for working through problems, so I'm getting much more efficient.
Okay.
So, and also much better at backing up, which is another thing you must always do. Back up everything. About once every hour, just back up what you're working on. Send it to a friend. That's what I do. I just email it to a friend.
I email it to myself so I don't lose it. Absolutely. So
yeah.
was your third novel the one that took close to 2 years to do that?
Yeah, something like that. I could look, but I'm not going to. No, some of the other ones took quite a long time, and also things started to, real life started to intrude.
Okay.
Because things started to happen that I had to deal with, and so therefore, I had less time. It was one of those ironic things. I was in a position where I didn't have to do certain things, but now I had to do other things. So
I understood. Okay. What would you say is probably the proudest writing achievement that you've had in your career?
First 4 pages of Rivers of London.
Okay.
It just came, and I just went, like I said, fuck me, this will sell. I just knew I had something hot. Okay. And you don't get that very often. You don't get the second most proudest is what happens at the end of book 4, which you don't get to mess with your audience quite as badly as that. That doesn't come along. You can try and force it, but it never comes twice. I'll never ever blindside my reading audience as badly as I do at the end of book 4, and in a way that makes total sense, so they're not cheated. Because if you can do a twist, but when you do a twist, you can't cheat the audience. The audience have to go, oh my God, I should have seen that coming. That's what makes a good twist, is when you go, of course. Oh, why was I so stupid? That's what you got to do. If that your your twist doesn't have that test. If it's just like, oh, okay. then why do it? There's no point doing a twist unless your audience literally starts banging its head on the desk.
No, I totally agree with you. I totally agree. So what has probably been the most heartbreaking writing experience?
I don't think I've had one yet.
Oh, excellent.
I love writing. I love being a writer. I love everything about it, from the lack of manual labor to the fact that you're kind of weirdly famous. So like about one person a week will come up and say, I really love your books, which is about enough, right?
Right.
Unlike like a pop star or something gets mobbed when they walk down the street, you can go shopping, right? And and you just get just enough validation to make your ego swell up, but not enough to kind of get in the way of your life. So it's the best kind of life, really, writing.
How often do you go to conventions like Comic-Con or something?
I get sent there. I get sent to convention.
Okay.
My publicist will go, you are going to this convention. I don't. I wasn't really a convention goer before.
Mm-hmm.
Mainly because it was the 70s and 80s, and it was more arduous going to conventions in those days because you had to find out about them, because it wasn't all on the internet. You couldn't just go. I did try and go to a Discworld convention as a punter, but I didn't realize that you had to book the tickets the second that went live on the website. And so I ended up having to phone them up and say, hi, my name's Ben Aaronovitch. You may know me from such books as Rivers of London. Can I come to your convention?
Right.
That was nice. And they let me come to the convention. I've gone to a couple of Discord conventions because if I had a fandom, which I don't really, but if I had a fandom, it would be Terry Pratchett.
Okay. Okay. And last question, Ben. What advice would you give beginning writers who are starting to work on their craft and career?
Okay, one, there are 3 pillars of writing, right? One, you have to read a lot, right? But I skew my advice, and this is kind of read stuff you like reading. I mean, occasionally challenge yourself with something that bores you to tears, but mostly just read stuff you like reading, okay? 2, you have to write. Okay, you have to write. So just write stuff. Write short stories, long stories, first chapter. If you don't like it, abandon it, write another chapter of something else. Just write until you find something that won't let you stop, right? And then keep going. And then thirdly, write the book you want to write. Okay, you'll hear a lot of stuff about research the audience, research. No, right? Nobody knows nobody knows what anyone's going to like. I'm a best-selling author, right? But when my book went to print, nobody knew that was going to happen, right? I didn't think I was going to be a best-selling author. My agent didn't think I was going to be a best-selling author, and my publisher didn't think. They only printed like 1,500 copies or something ridiculously small like that. They had to do an emergency printout, which is brilliant. But the point being is we didn't know, right?
Right.
Nobody knows what's going to catch the public imagination. They didn't know Harry Potter. They certainly didn't think, 50 Shades of Grey, right? Nobody went, oh, yeah, what we're reading now is a bit of sadomasochism. Yay, right? It's just... So write the book you want to write. There are certain things you can do to make it sellable, right? So don't make it boring. And there's a good book called How Not to Write a Novel, which I heartily recommend because it just goes through all the kind of mistakes people make, that starting out mistakes you can make as a writer, and some of them you can, and some you might ignore them. It's just, you can't be too prescriptive about these things. It must feel like the right story for you. A good example of that is my friend Andrew Cartmel, right? There's a whole section in this book why you shouldn't put your cat in your book, right? And Andrew loves cats.
Okay. I thought you liked vinyl records.
And he said, but he likes cats, right? He likes cats. He also likes cats. And I said, no, put your cats in the book. And he said, but you keep saying, don't put your bloody cat in the book, right? I said, don't put your cat in the book in that kind of mawkish kind of way. Oh, I love my cat. My cat loves me. But if you put your cats realistically and honestly in your book, they will add to the book. And he did. And the cats add to the book. They add a certain something to the book. He doesn't overdo it. They're not idealized cats. They're just, the scurrilous little psychopathic predators that they are in real life, right? I'm not a cat person, okay?
I got that. You have a dog?
No, I would have a dog. If I had one, I would have a dog. Okay. I don't have enough space for a dog. But, I would have a dog. I mean, it's not that I think keeping cats is intrinsically bad. It's just you have to know what you're dealing with, right? Somebody who will eat your face once you're dead, right? That's fine. As long as you live with that, that's fine. I personally, if I'm going to feed something, I want a bit more loyalty than that. Thank you very much. But I'm not going to get into that.
Right. I understand.
But my point being is that he broke that rule, and that was fine. You can break rules, but you need to know what the rules are before you break them, and you need to know why you're breaking the rules. And so, things like repeating the opening where you go through someone's day, the very boring opening where you go through someone's day before you change up their day, things to avoid, just things that will get you thrown off the slush pile. And the other thing to remember is this. The person reading your book, right, is not someone who has a lot of time, right? The editor, or more likely, not the editor, the agent, or more likely the agent's assistant, right? They are reading this on an e-reader on the subway, right, with someone's armpit in their face, right? And what they want, or in the laundrette, or in the wherever Americans go to do these things, right? And they are reading this and they want to fall in love. That's the criteria they want. It's not they're not looking for it's quite good, it's not bad. They're looking to fall in love because they're getting like 100 books a week, right? And most of them are terrible, and most of them are okay. Some of them are okay, but what they want is that book that makes me go, oh my God, I love this book. I want to sell it, because they're going to have to go out and spend a tremendous amount of time on faith that they're not getting paid for, going out and selling this book. They want to fall in love. Now, the corollary of this, and the bit that they don't like, right, when I say this, is that like falling in love, you can't predict it. Right? You think you have a type, and then you fall in love with someone else completely. So all those advice that says check to see what they write, unless they exclude, right, the agent or the editor categorically excludes the category that you want. So if they say no fantasy, or we only do non-fiction or something like that, you're basically sending your book to everyone, every single person. But you make sure, and this is really important, you follow the instructions on their submission page, because that is an intelligence test, right? the intelligence, and they will all be different to try and catch you out, right? It's an intelligence test because these days, in the old days, and I know this because I was there, right? People used to submit books on pink notepaper and crayon, right? Okay, which and they would just go in, or they'll probably filed for a laugh later, but they would just be rejected out of hand. Now everyone has a computer, everyone has Final Draft for scripts and Word for Windows or whatever. Everyone's manuscripts are lovely Times New Roman, double space Times New Roman, single page. Everyone knows that. So the only way you can to weed out people, they will if they see if people are intelligent enough to read the instructions. Because if you read it and it says, "Do not send us the full novel, just send us the first 4,000 words," right? And you send them the full novel, they know you're just going to be a pain. And so they're not going to have anything to do with you. So you must follow the instructions. Those are my rules for getting sold. Plus, but mostly it's write what you want, read what you want, submit to everyone. I think it's the summary.
Understood. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Ben, before we finish up here?
Yes, you should all buy my books. I still need the money, strangely, after all these years. I can't believe. Obviously, I've just become more expensive or something. If you want to read my books, it's best to start with the first one. Not because you can't start with one of the books later on, but I guarantee you will have more fun if you start with the first one, right? And also it's cheaper. So if you can read that one, and if you don't like it, you don't have to read the rest. If you like slightly more kind of YA stuff, then what Abigail did that summer, which is one of the novellas, might be fun for you if you don't want to read like big, thick, heavy books. Not everyone does. Not everyone has the time. If you like audiobooks, I have a really good narrator called Cobner Holbrook-Smith, who narrates the audiobook, and he is top notch, and a lot of people love him to death, and I'm a bit worried he'll become too expensive, and because he gets more famous. And so, I just enjoy books. If you like them, read more of them. That's my thing. I'm not bothered if you listen to them, read them on ebooks. Authors actually get more of a percentage on ebooks than we do on hard copies. So don't feel bad about buying an ebook.
No, most of my sales are ebooks too.
Understood. Yeah, this is the ebooks are the new paperbacks in my opinion. I think ebooks are the new paperbacks. Now I like physical books, but that just generally means I buy books 3 times now. I buy them in hard copy, I buy them as an ebook, and I buy them as an audiobook so that I can read them on, take my e-reader on a bus or something, and I can listen to them while I'm walking or cleaning or stuff like that. So I think, authors are doing very well out of me, basically.
Understood. Yeah, no, I totally get it. Well, Ben, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
It was a totally enjoyable experience. And
bing bong.